to become self-governing in some fashion in the future. And this is, my personal favorite, which is that we think of a federation of Guam and the Northern Marianas. Now, that doesn't mean you can't still have local autonomy, and there could still be a governor of Guam, a governor of the Northern Marianas. You could still have your own internal matters handled separately, or different court systems, or any way you wanted to. But in terms of dealing with Washington, you would join forces and have a common face. And that would, I think, make people in Washington take the initiative much more seriously. And each has things to offer the other. Guam seems to be more prosperous at the present time.
Are you brainwashing us?
No,
because we need to explore our independence also.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about that in a moment. I'm almost finished. No, I'm not brainwashing you. I'm just putting out options for you to consider. And appreciate your patience with me. So the economy here in Guam seems to be stronger, but in some ways the Chamorro culture is stronger in the Northern Marianas. And so you hear the language spoken more up there, and so each side has something to offer the other in terms of coming together through this fashion. Maybe it could be a state, or maybe it could have a new and unique relationship whereby you'd have, say, one member of the House, maybe one in the Senate, and you'd have provisions dealing with the local culture and values here. This is the package that I think might ultimately be the one that would bring together the various options and ideas, but obviously this is just the voice of an outsider. But I do think that something needs to happen, and that the present situation is unsustainable, and that the people of Guam and the people of the Northern Marianas should try to change the situation. I mean, some people say, well, we're so far away, how would it be realistic for us to be part of the United States? French Polynesia, Wallis and Futuna are part of France, and they're even farther away. They send voting representatives to Paris, and they have more self-governance than you folks do. So it's not, the distance in this day and age shouldn't be a deterrent. There's a little place that's so small it doesn't even appear on a map, called Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, that's just south of Newfoundland, that is part of France. These little islands here, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, are part of France, and they send people to Paris. So there are lots of strange things. There's a part of Russia that's not contiguous with Russia, that's over here between Lithuania and Poland. So the world is familiar with odd configurations. And the United States, of course, has Hawaii and Alaska already. So there's no reason why Guam couldn't be a state, or Guam and the Marianas together couldn't be a state, or couldn't have a real relationship with the United States. And these population figures, this is my last slide, but so if you combine the two Guam and the CNMI, you have about 250,000, which is more than Alaska had in 1959. And it's about the same as French Polynesia. Wyoming is our smallest state now. It has 544,000, but not really out of the picture to imagine a smaller state with 250 or so thousand people. Anyway, thank you for listening to me, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Professor Van Dyke. I do have some questions here. If you have questions, please write them down on the 3x5 cards, and I will read them in the order that I got. Right now, I only have 3 with one announcement. So, Dr. Van Dyke, Professor Van Dyke, the first question. In a book / article, you reach a conclusion about Crown lands of Hawaii. Do you have any comments on whether your conclusion will result in any change of title or status in Hawaii? Any comment about Guam's Crown land?
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for the plug for my book. I've written a book called Who Owns the Crown Lands of Hawaii, which I try to go through the history of how lands changed hands in Hawaii and explain the powerful claim that the Native Hawaiians have to a return of lands. The Crown lands are about 1 million acres out of the 4 million acres that make up Hawaii. And I believe that would make a very nice homeland for the Hawaiians, a very nice chunk of land that would sustain them as a people into the future. And I argue in my book that the Crown lands were uniquely Hawaiian because they were the lands that Kamehameha III set aside for himself in 1848, and they then were controlled by the monarchs, who were, of course, always Hawaiian. So I do. I guess the question was, does anybody take my view seriously? I think that this claim is not going to go away. It's going to have to be dealt with. The Akaka bill would set in motion a process of the return of lands. The House passed the Akaka bill. It hasn't yet passed the Senate, and given the political configuration now, it's not clear what's going to happen with it. But sooner or later, and I hope sooner, the United States is going to have to provide the Native Hawaiians the same kind of opportunities that other natives have had for a return of land and resources so that they can function as indigenous people into the future. And I do think that the Chamorro people of Guam have similar rights to land, absolutely.
Thank you for that answer. This seems to be comment, but I'll read it and then we'll see where we can go from here. The slide referenced Draft Commonwealth Act says, paragraph 202, without the mutual consent. Your lecture said only with consent. I guess there's a clarification.
Well, I'm not sure whether it was a typo or because you had to read it sort of backwards to see how that works. Let's see if we can get that up here. Okay, so it says that no federal law applies to Guam without the mutual consent of the two governments. So that means that the Guam, if this had become law, that the Guam legislature would have had to approve every federal law passed by Congress before it could take effect in Guam. It would, I guess, keep the legislature pretty busy thinking about all these federal laws. But in any event, it would require a separate enactment before the federal law could have an effect. Yeah. So this was basically saying we're going our own way, and that's why, to me, this seems like a free association status, because it's saying we're not under the control of the Congress any longer.
Thank you for that clarification. Next question. What protections exist for indigenous people in self-governing nations? Example, Kurds in Iraq, Christians in Muslim countries. Is UN concerned?
Okay. Kurds are certainly a distinct ethnic group. I'm not sure people would classify the Kurds as indigenous people. Certainly the Kurds have rights. They have rights to use their language and maintain their culture and govern their own resources, but I don't think that we think of the Kurds as indigenous people. But in any event, the broader answer to the question is that indigenous people do have rights under domestic and international laws. And so in the United States, we have a vast array of laws governing Indians, and they can seek protection under a whole series of laws and constitutional provisions. And in other countries, these laws are developing. Canada has some of its own sort of unique approaches to protecting its indigenous people. Australia is slow in protecting the Aborigines, but they're doing better now. New Zealand is doing quite well, and Japan is doing better. So each country is approaching this, and we're seeing now a series of good, solid legal protections for indigenous peoples in many countries.